ages of 25 and 54 are not only not working, they're affirmatively not looking for work. 7.2 million. This never happened in the history of this country, at least in peacetime. This is a whole new thing. And in the midst of this new thing, we have 11 million open jobs that people aren't excited about, many of which don't require a 4-year degree. And yet, we have $1.7 trillion in student loans on the books as we speak. And what are we doing? We're lending money we don't have to a generation of kids who are never going to be able to pay it back, to train them for jobs in majors that really don't exist anymore. Meanwhile, welders, steam fitters, pipe fitters, plumbers, carpenters, HVAC, electricians, men and women like my pop are in desperate, desperate need. And so that's what I meant when I said, in a little soundbite, yeah, we've declared a war on work. Because look, if those 7.2 million men were making their zip codes a better place, if they were pursuing one of those 1,000 points of light that Bush Sr. talked about, if they were volunteering, if they were contributing in some way, okay, I'm all about liberty and freedom. I'm all about the individual saying, something, I don't want to work, so I'm going to do this instead. I would never get in the way of that. But that's not what's happening, and the data is clear. Mm-hmm. What the data tells us is they're spending 2,000 plus hours a year on screens. What are they doing? Is it Call of Duty? Is it Halo? Are they updating their Instagram feed? Are they swiping left or right? I don't know. But we know what they're not doing. And that makes me nervous on a macro level. Mm-hmm. On a micro level, I'm just saying, you know what? Our country needs a peripatia. I had a peripatia when I realized PETA was wrong and the sheep farmer was right. And if I'm wrong about that, what else am I wrong about?
So I'm going to ask one final question, then we're going to take questions from the audience. All right, so.
They're trying to clap, dude. Please, let them clap for a second.
Right.
Let's just let it breathe. Let the art wash over you.
So, politics is often called a dirty business. Politics.
Uh-huh.
But you have a unique ability, I noticed, when I went on YouTube to just look at some of your past experiences, including the Teats experience and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I noticed you're on CNN, you're on NBC, CNBC, you're on all the major networks, you're on PBS, you're on Fox News, and every one of them think you're their friend.
That's nice.
And what is the unique formula? Because in today's divisive world, you are a unique figure. And yet I'm sure you have political views.
I do.
So how do you manage that? That seems to be a unique skill. Is there something you can teach us so that at Freedom Fest, we have lots of debates. We want to make them civil. We don't want to have people walking away angry at each other. How do you do that? What would you advise our people?
I was sitting out here listening to Michael Shellenberger, who I've had on my podcast, who I think is terrific. I was talking last night at dinner with Ennis Freedom, who I've had on my podcast, who I think is terrific. I was listening to Matt Taibbi, who I haven't had on my podcast, but I'd like to because I think he's terrific.
What about me?
You, I'm waiting to go to a spring training game with.
Okay.
Because I think you're terrific. But they all used a word that I really like and that I try and use a lot too. They used two words, actually. They said, I worry and I wonder. I worry and I wonder. I worry that this work ethic thing is not a problem, but a symptom of some larger, super icky thing. And I wonder what will happen if we don't get in front of it. Mm-hmm. I worry that $1.7 trillion in student loans is simply too much. I worry that the cost of a 4-year degree has gotten more expensive more quickly than any other valuable thing in the history of Western civilization. 500% faster than inflation over the last 40 years. That's faster than food, energy, real estate, and healthcare. Nothing in the world has ever gotten that expensive that fast. And I worry if we don't do something about it, the cost, then universities will have no incentive to lower their tuition. So if I'm gonna weigh in, I try and stay in my lane. My foundation is focused on workforce issues and education. So I try not to wander into vaccines, as you so graciously dragged me minutes into our unscripted exchange.
That's probably the only quote will be from the media on that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But I don't mind, because the truth is I've tried to train myself to say, look, I worry about our institutions, for instance. I worry that experts today have not quite got the memo that Atlas shrugged. Things have changed, right? We can't simply, as an expert, say, oh, well, this is how it is, and you need to take my word for it, because if you haven't noticed, I have many, many initials after my name. And here's my accreditation, here's my paper, right? That worked for a long time, and I worry that it's not working right now. And I wonder what will happen. I wonder what will happen if our experts just keep telling us to trust them. I'm thinking right now, for instance, of, you mentioned Kennedy. Well, I heard him on Rogan, like a lot of other people did. And then I heard Rogan offer Peter Hotez, right, to come back on and debate him, put up $100,000. And he said no. And then a bunch of other people threw in money. I think it's over $1 million now, inviting Dr. Hotez to come back and have a debate with Kennedy. So there's another guy I listen to, Sam Harris, who I like a lot, has a podcast called Making Sense. And last week, maybe just a couple days ago, he said, you know what? I wouldn't have Robert Kennedy on my podcast because I don't want to platform him and I don't want to shine a light on these things that have been debunked. Now, to answer your question, I don't need to weigh in on this.
Yeah.
Not on CNN, not on Fox, not on anything in between. But I can't help it because in that moment, something really seemed clear to me. It seems clear to me that Sam Harris doesn't think the entire world has changed. He thinks he can still point, his exact words were, I don't want to have Robert Kennedy on the podcast because he's not a scientist and he's not an expert. He's a lawyer and an advocate. But my feeling is we've entered a new world for the time being, and it's incumbent on our experts, both in the political class and the scientific community and the medical community, and most of all, in the media. It's incumbent on them to persuade us to re-earn our trust. It's not incumbent on us to stop doubting. It's not incumbent on us to be less skeptical. We need to be incredibly skeptical. And if what comes back over the net is some sort of hyphen denier thing, well, screw that. I'm not denying anything. I'm just curious. I want the experts to persuade me, not to simply point to something and say, that was settled. Can we move on now? We can't. Something really fundamental has been broken in the public trust.
Wow.
And I don't know how we get that back on track, but I do think that our elected officials owe us a duty of care to do that, and I especially believe that our media has to do it. And you know what? If the mainstream won't, then I'm looking at guys like Matt and Michael. I'm looking at them. I'm looking at Substack, and a lot of other people are too. And that's growing. So I wonder what will happen if it keeps growing, and I worry what will happen if it doesn't.
Well, I'll clap for that. By the way,
Look
in
at us.
case you wonder, I have a BA, MS, and PhD in economics.
Yeah, but you know what? You still take the time to persuade.
That's true, yeah.
You point it out as a matter of history, and that's all it is. You've written 25 books. You're still writing. I read your newsletter. You're still at it. You're not sitting back and going, look what I did. My sense of you is that you wake up every day and say, the fight is afoot. Points need to be made. The stakes are high.
Yeah, keep going, keep going.
No.
That's it. Yeah.
And then he goes to see a spring training game. Screw it. Let's
All
watch
right.
some baseball.
Let's take some questions. So keep them short. Let's go and see how many questions we can get in. Yes, sir.